All right, John, we got a lot to get to.
Okay.
Let's start with the Blue Jays first. What are you hearing in terms of like their pursuit of whether it's Cody Bellinger, whether it's Matt Chapman returning? Um, the problem I think for the front office is that you would like them to get credit for their pursuit of Otani and being interested in Otani, but fans are not they're not as nuanced as that. They're not going to be as rational as that. Like, oh, thank you, front office, for being in it. Like, what they want is they want the product on the field in 2024 to improve, and the only way that can happen, obviously, is with some addition. So, from your perspective, what is realistic you think for them?
I do believe the Jays are among the teams that are on Cody Bellinger and his free agent market. I would expect will start to clarify once Yamamoto makes his decision, because there is some overlap in the teams that could be involved in either pursuit. But I agree with you, Richard. I think you look at the everyday club right now, and I think it's an important point to make that here we are on the winter solstice on the 21st of December, and it would be difficult for any observer to look at the Jays lineup now and say that they're better than they were when the season ended, which we know was obviously not good enough. They did not have a very good postseason series against Minnesota. They had some offensive flaws that were exposed late in the season. They no longer have Matt Chapman on the roster. They no longer have Kevin Kiermaier on the roster. So there are a lot of questions right now. And I do think that Chapman coming back to Toronto is one of the many options that is out there. I would also look at someone like Rhys Hoskins. In general, the Jays are a team who need to find some offensive elements that create at-bats that look differently from the way they looked at times late last season when they were very susceptible to right-handers with stuff. And that was the case. You go back to the series against the Mariners in the fall of 2022 and Luis Castillo. Whether it is more lefty bats or more righties with a more of a contact-oriented approach, or those that just have the ability to I think, put the ball in play and show that two-strike mentality, we need to see more of that from the Jays. And Bellinger would help. Rhys Hoskins would help. Chapman, the version of Chapman that we saw early last season would help. But there are not a lot of perfect solutions out there for the Jays right now.
Boy, more lefty bats. How many years have we heard that?
Right. Well, and
Time.
John, that's a fair point. And by the way, I should make this point and be clear about it. It's not just the lefty bat that is the number one priority, because you look at the trade they made a year ago and clearly it hasn't worked out. Gurriel had a tremendous year with Arizona. Moreno, it looks like the Jays maybe didn't fully realize what they had with him because of how well he played on both sides of the ball for the Arizona Diamondbacks. I am a believer that Varsho is going to be better in year 2 than he was in year 1, with the adjustment now to Toronto and playing in the American League. But John, you raise a good point. It's not just get a lefty bat. It has to be the right left-handed bat.
I see to you, John. I'll break the silence.
Yeah, no, okay, so let's deal with the 900-pound elephant in the corner, John. How have you dealt with and managed, both privately and professionally, since your tweet about Otani's flight?
John, thanks for the question. I appreciate it. All things considered, very good. We've been back on the air with MLB Network, obviously, every weekday. Sure. Since then, had my day with the U.S. World Junior team for the NHL Network side of things a week ago, and that went great as well. I would say this: it's still a challenge in a lot of ways to work through. It's typically still one of the first things that crosses my mind when I wake up in the morning. It's probably going to be that way for a while, and I have to own that. I'm certainly very apologetic, and I'm sorry to all the fans who were affected by what I'd reported on that day. I've learned a lot and worked with some colleagues on how I can make my process better and be more discerning and really look at the information that I've got as I've reported it. And I've looked at it in the realm of professional development and ways that I can improve and be accountable to what transpired on that day, and also ways to improve my reporting going forward. As we all know, None of us are perfect in this job. I chose, not chose, but it just so happened that I had a really bad day at the worst possible time. And I have to take ownership of that. And I'm someone that if people ask me about it in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, hopefully I'm still doing this job then. I will continue to apologize for that for the balance of my career and own the mistake for the balance of my career. And that's okay. I can handle that. It's a matter, the only, as I see it, the only tragedy of it would be if I did not learn from it. And that to me is the biggest thing. There are ways to be better, and that's where my focus has been. I accept every bit of criticism that comes from the mistake that I made, and my apologies for it. I also say that as broadcasters and writers and journalists, we're only as good as our last show. And so at the same time as I accept the criticism for what I reported about Ohtani's flight, I also just ask to have the fans judge all of our shows and all of our content as it rolls forward. And if they believe that I've done a good job, I appreciate that. And if they think I need to get better, I appreciate that too.
John, without going into sourcing, which you clearly would not, why did this happen?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think that by the time I hit the button on the tweet, I was completely sure of the information that I had. Completely sure. It just so happened that obviously the information was not accurate that was given to me. And I've gone back through my process and thought about it. And there were parts about my process that I liked and I think I did correctly. And there were parts that I think I should have been better on. And that's, again, that's on me to do it. But this was not a simple decision that I made late in the afternoon to share the information. This was an accumulation of information that was all pointing in one direction, which was that he was on the plane. And clearly he wasn't. And we all know what's happened since then. I will say this. I did not, as the day was going along, I did not spend a lot of time reflecting on what the ramifications would be if I was wrong, because I was quite convinced, and indeed, by the time I hit the button, completely convinced in that moment that the information I had was correct. And we obviously know that it wasn't now, and that's something that I have to own. But this was not a matter of one person telling me one thing. This was a matter of multiple sources at different times during the day from different angles on the story, all telling me the same thing. And it ended up being incorrect, and I take ownership of that. But this was not a decision that was made quickly or hastily. It was the product of a lot of dialogue and a lot of information that I got over the day, and I was just wrong.
We'll take no solace because you won't get it, is that we've all done it. We have all lived, we've lived in that world. And for a couple of days, it's not fun. It's just not fun. And we get over it and life goes on. And when you put in terms of what makes you happy, what makes you professional, John, you're still at the top of the list as far as I'm concerned. So
I appreciate it, John. And that to me, it really pulled a lot of things into focus for me in many ways as I thought about the job that I have, that I'm so fortunate to have, and the people that I get to interact with every day. And I would say this, the amount of encouragement and pats on the back that I receive from people whose opinions I really care about, it's been honestly overwhelming in a positive way. And I think that the right thing to do was to take ownership of the mistake and apologize publicly as I did, because it was in my heart that I said I have to be accountable for what I said and what happened, and that was the best way forward. I've always been someone that, because of how I was raised and my family, we don't judge people on their worst days, and professionally that was my worst day. And so I want to extend myself that same grace and say I'm better than I was on that day. I now have to learn from it and be better. And I referenced, earlier on, just experiences that you have in life and the ways that the job becomes something that you have perspective on. And I love the job so much that even on the days when it was hard, especially those first several days, I still loved doing it. And in a lot of ways, that's a pretty cool gift to have that unique perspective on your job that, darn it, it's not fun to go through this and to have to grind through these first few days afterward. But the positive feedback and the people in the sport whose opinion I really care about, and people in our business whose opinion I really care about, they really lifted me up in a pretty profound way. So it's, at the end of the day, it's about one of those cliches that we always hate hearing as journalists about mastering the best effort that you can every day. Turns out that's actually really helpful advice. And so I've just tried to give myself that advice. Get up in the morning, make your phone calls, get on the air, do the best job you can, and repeat it. And keep stacking up good days on top of each other. And in that way, hopefully, you move forward and be accountable and just be grateful. Honestly, I would say that I've honestly become, I've always been a pretty grateful person to have the job that I have. In somewhat of an unexpected way, I've become even more grateful than ever to have the job that I have.